I'm an anxious Jew. No, really. I'm an anxious Jew. Not in the Woody Allen, New York comedic way, but in the very real, clinical way. I am an anxious Jew. I have suffered from anxiety since my teens, and while few of you would necessarily realize it, if I had to pick an overarching emotional theme for my life, it would be that of stress and worry. I stress about our community, this building, this room, which all seem to be doing far better than I could ever have imagined when I joined this congregation 6 years ago. But I still worry. I worry about you, my congregants. And I fear that while I'm doing everything I can to support many of you and your families, I'm simultaneously disappointing others because I'm not available to them. And while every day that I remain in remission from leukemia reduces my likelihood of relapse, I constantly worry about my health and the impact that it continues to have on my wife, my children, and our family. Like many of our young people who took to the streets last week in protest, I worry about this planet, our climate, the sea levels, and our seeming inability to reduce, reuse, and recycle our own waste in this city. And like so many of you, I worry once more about the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, synagogue shootings and bombings in the US, and the proliferation of swastikas and hate on our own streets here in Melbourne. With all of this as our backdrop, I found myself wondering if I'm being naive or perhaps even Pollyannish when I stand here on this bimmer, look out at this congregation, and wish you all a Shana Tova, a good year. Surrounded by all this madness and this mayhem, can we really wish each other a good year? Is it actually possible that the year that lies ahead could be filled with blessing and goodness for us, for our families, for our community, for our country? Well, our rabbis certainly thought so. That's why they put celebrating Rosh Hashanah with all of its potential and all of its promise ahead of the past remorse we face on Yom Kippur. For they understood that while there might be a lot to worry about in our lives, in our community, in our country, or even in this world, they also understood that there's more to life than being constantly anxious. They understood that in order to manage the muck of our past, we need first to have hope in our future. And believe me when I say that our sages knew a lot more about anxiety than we do. Consider the Unatana Tokef prayer, which we recited just a few moments ago in the midst of our Amidah. The prayer that poignantly and powerfully asks, Mi yichyeh u'mi yamut, who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age and who will be taken before their time? Then, Then, as if speaking directly to us and to our time, the prayer goes on to ask the very real questions. Mi yashkit u'mi yitoraf, mi yishalev u'mi yitzater. Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who will be tormented? Tranquil, troubled, calm, tormented. Profound questions that certainly speak to many of us. But amazingly, this prayer was neither written for us nor for our times. The Unatana Tokef prayer was written at least 1,300 years ago. Life 13 centuries ago was nothing but anxiety. Rape, murder, muggings, death by fire or flood or plague or starvation or war were daily occurrences. 1,300 years ago, 1/3 of all children were dead before the age of 5. 1,300 years ago, if they had it, every one of our ancestors would have been on antidepressants. But our ancestors had a different, a more powerful prescription for managing their anxiety and their fear. Remember how the Unatana Tokef prayer ends. Remember what comes after that long list of terrible things to worry about this coming year? 3 simple words that got them through. Tshuva, utfila, mutzedakah. By returning to the right paths through prayer and righteous giving, they believed that they could transcend the harshness of God's decree and make whatever comes next easier to live with and easier to live through. 3 simple things that our rabbis prescribed to help them get through the trials and tribulations of their life. But 3 simple things that I believe can help each and every one of us as well. So to the first, tshuva, repentance. What is repentance really? Other than trying to make things right with others. Our ancestors lived in small villages where the key to survival was the quality of the relationships they had with a handful of people who really mattered. Are we any different? Do any of us have more than a small handful of people in our lives who really matter? So when that wave of worry sometimes overwhelms me, when I cannot sleep, when I don't understand myself, I reach out to Mish. I tell her. I hang out with Liv and Sam doing nothing much, which of course means everything. I pour out to friends who I know will never gossip about me. I've learned that often the only thing that helps is opening my heart to those who I deeply love. So double down, says the Unatana Tokef. When we are in pain, when we are lost, when we are afraid, return to your most important relationships. Cherish them. Nurture them. No one, and I mean no one, endures suffering better alone. Tend to your relationships, our rabbis teach us. Tend to your relationships with tuvah. Don't let the centrifuge of life's stresses whirl your family and your friendships apart. Double down. Make things right with the people you love, for only love can lift us from our suffering and from our fear. And then there's the second part of our Rabbi's prescription. Tefillah, prayer. Now I know what many of you might be thinking. Oh great, the world is coming apart at its seams and Gersh wants me to pray. I didn't think he was such a literalist. I do want you to pray, but not in the way that most people think. The English word prayer comes from the Latin word precari, which means to beg. But the Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah, from the root pelel, which means to reflect upon or to elevate oneself. The rabbis did not envision God as a cosmic granter of wishes. To the contrary, our rabbis understood that prayer is supposed to change us, not God. Prayer is a different way of thinking about the world. Prayer is the counting of our blessings even when we sit at such a difficult time in our lives. It's about counting our blessings even when our blessings seem so distant, so far away. Consider the Kaddish. When we least feel like it, when we'd rather sink into the ground and die ourselves, when we feel so terribly cursed, we are commanded to stand up and affirm the blessing of life. I keep a small laminated copy of the Asher Yatzar, the prayer for health, in my wallet. It's there to remind me about the miracles of our bodies. I say it every morning because after I was diagnosed with cancer and broke my back, I never thought that my body would work the same way again. I still can't feel my feet. Perhaps I never will. But I pray each morning because I can put on my own socks and shoes. Simple blessings are easy to miss. So yes, pray. Use whatever words you wish, but count your blessings. I promise you, it will change your life. Now, I'm not suggesting that our world is perfect or that our news is fake, but I am contending that it is often a false sample. For example, 200 years ago, 90% of the world's population subsisted in extreme poverty. Today, fewer than 10% of the people do. And the world has never been more democratic, with 2/3 of the world's people living in democracies. Last year, the world had 12 ongoing wars, recorded 60 atrocities, and counted more than 10,000 nuclear weapons. But 30 years ago, there were 23 wars, 85 recorded atrocities, and more than 60,000 nuclear weapons. Over the last century, we have become 96% less likely to be killed in a car crash, 88% less likely to be mowed down on the pavement, 99% less likely to die in a plane crash, 95% less likely to be killed on the job, and 89% less likely to be killed by drought, flood, bushfires, storms, volcanoes, or landslides. Who shall die by water? Who shall die by fire? The fact is, Probably not a single one of us. But when the oceans are rising and our forests are burning, it's incredibly difficult to acknowledge that while we still have a long way to go, things are really much better than they've ever been. But this difficulty, this modern challenge that each and every one of us encounter, is not new. As the Talmud explains, we do not see things as they are, but rather we see things as we are. What we see is always within us, even before we begin to look. If you don't believe that people are mostly good, you will see mostly evil in others. If you expect the worst, you will be blind to your blessings. If you think religion is the source of evil, you will never see the good that religion does for people. We see the world not as it is, but we see the world as we are. Progress is the greatest fact in human history. We are surrounded by miracles every day. But as humanity has got healthier, wealthier, wiser, safer, and happier, so many of us have become more anxious and more afraid, believing that the time has come where there is nothing to do but pray. For many of us, prayer is the response of last resort. But our rabbis put it first, not last, because our rabbis understood that it is hard to be hopeless when you are grateful. It really is hard to be hopeless when you are grateful. And let's not forget the final anecdote to fear prescribed by the rabbis in the Unetana Tokef prayer. Tzedakah, the righteous act of helping others. As many of you know, I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and in many ways was shaped by the likes and dislikes, actions and inactions of my siblings. I didn't know it at the time, but I learned resilience from my eldest brother, who would often respond to my tears by letting me know that if I didn't stop crying, he'd really give me something to cry about. I hated it when I was a boy. But the older I became, the more I realized, crude as that brotherly love was, there's a lot to be said for perspective. We all need reminding that things really could be worse, and that for many people, they are worse. When someone comes to see me to discuss a problem or a challenge in their life, I often offer a seemingly unrelated solution. After listening to them and their story, their fears and their anxieties, I look them in the eye and I say, have you thought about volunteering at Nourish on a Monday night? Or serving lunch on Wednesdays and Thursdays? Serve bread and soup to the homeless, the mentally ill, the friendless, the forgotten, the aged poor, and I promise you will have new perspective on your own life. As the proverb teaches, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want happiness for a lifetime, help somebody in need. We do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. And so on the threshold of this new year, I stand on this bimah as your rabbi, humbly asking, who am I? Really, who am I? Can I become calmer, better, more hopeful, and at peace in the year to come? On this threshold of this new year, I stand here on this bimah as your rabbi, looking out at you and asking as well, who are you? Really? Who are you? And how will you find the hope and the peace that are sometimes so elusive in your life? My friends, the answer was given to us long ago. Let us love more deeply through tshuva. Whatever our losses are, let us count our many blessings with tefillah. And come what may, let us reach out with what we have to those who have less, with tzedakah.
בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון.
On Rosh Hashanah, it is written. On Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Gmar Chatima Tova. May our actions ensure that each and every one of us are inscribed for blessing. Shana Tova.